Thank you all for your attendance, for showing up in France this year. It's a beautiful country. I'm a born and raised California beach boy, so this is my first trip here, and it's absolutely beautiful. I'm going to talk about some nutrition today. It's not so much on the technical side, but more for your practical growers. So the growers in the audience, I think, will get quite a bit out of this talk. I'd like to talk about nutrition for maximizing yields in carrots. A lot of people just come in assuming that they can just grow carrots, potatoes, what have you, with not ascertaining nutrition from soil reports and what have you. And you really need to have sharp agronomists and people that understand how to ascertain soil reports and go from there. So in California, we are growing the Imperator-type carrot. The goal is to have the basal end at the same diameter as your distal end. So I know here in Europe and in France you like to grow the nonce varieties, but for us it's all about this, processing into getting to the market. This is my French for the day. Beauté du carotte. So here we have California. I consider this the global region for carrot production. As you can see, it extends all the way up here into the middle part of the San Joaquin Valley and all the way down here into the southern part of the desert. In this region of the United States, we can grow over 100,000 acres of carrots a year. There's 3 primary companies that do so. So I think we're the largest carrot production anywhere on the globe. There's a lot of complexity. Here you have the Sierra Nevada range, and you have Yosemite and a lot of granitic parent material. On the coast, you have a lot of sandstones and serpentinic parent material. So both sides cause complex issues for fertility. This is the whole crux in carrot production right here. I apologize, it's not in kilograms per hectare, but we do everything in tons per acre in the West, so you have to do your conversions yourself. But this is the amount of total N you're going to need, P, and potassium. This is the importance. People go into farming and they don't nearly have enough potassium that the crop's going to remove. And this is all based on crop removal rates. So this is actually what the crop's going to remove per ton an acre. Here you have the sulfur, calcium, and magnesium. With carrots, as you know, it's a root crop, so the demand for P is very, very demanding up front and early. And with many soil systems, we talked about acidity or alkalinity. Many times the P is not available and it's tied up. So it's very crucial for you carrot growers to have an optimal P that's available at the crucial time. The crucial time for carrot production for P, as you can see, starts in the very beginning. And the curve slopes down between the 30th and 40th day. So if you do not have available P during that time, you've missed the boat. You need to have P available early on in your carrot growth. It's very, very steep. It's a very, very demanding curve early on. So here we have a very typical coastal soil sample from California. And things we like to look at as agronomists right off the bat is your exchangeable potassium, and you want to compare it to what's actually in solution, because what you have in the exchange sites might not be available. So you always want to look at things in solution, as well as your calcium levels. And then after you would ascertain since the potassium is your major crop removal, we solve over 400 pounds an acre, you'd move in down into your micronutrients and ascertain to make sure what kind of micronutrient levels you have available. It's really important in carrot production, since roots are extremely well miners of nutrition, is to have a complete and holistic package before the plant is put into the ground by seed. So you want to have a complete fertility package with your pre-plant going out. After you would ascertain these parameters, you would come down and look, obviously, what your pH is. Am I going to acidify? am I going to bring the pH up? Another big crux with carrot fertility is your bicarbonates. Much of our calcium in the western United States gets tied up in calcium bicarbonate. You want to break this bicarbonate up to allow more free calcium in solution. As you can see in California, look at the difference, 6,800 parts per million on the exchange sites, but when you see what's actually in solution, you only have 600. So just because your soil test shows that you have a lot of calcium, that might not be true. You need to always look at what's going on in solution. The next thing, as you can see, we always have EC issues, lots of salinity in California, especially with the drought going on. So as we get less and less rain, our TDS numbers will increase. And we also have quite a bit of sodicity, so we're always looking at our sodium absorption ratio, trying to displace that with pre-plant calcium. So as you agronomists out there and growers, if you're not taking this whole picture in, you're not going to farm to the capacity that you can. If you take all these parameters in every field, you will start to optimize and see better quality and much better yields in your carrots. From that prior soil sample I showed you, this would have been the recommendation that I would have gave for this particular grower at that time. So after all those parameters I just explained to you, this is what that crop would need to produce optimum yield and optimum quality so you can outperform your competition. So we would be putting out 191 pounds of P, a little bit of N coming out with your pre-plant P, and your micronutrients. Here's some old technology micronutrients. This is your sulfates, and this is a much more new, modern, efficient micronutrient, and you can see there's a lot less micronutrients needed here with newer innovative technology than with older technology. You got to be careful with the older technologies, especially when you start getting up into the higher pHs, because they tie up and they're not readily available. That's something to always consider. So after looking at the soil report, we saw that we had a pretty high pH, so we need to add some sulfur to the soil to break up those bicarbonates and lower the pH down, and add a little bit of potassium and then our pre-plant P. And this is really key, because if you're not looking at your soil samples and you're coming off a crop and you don't know what you're doing, you have no idea what that crop's going to remove. This is the basis for any kind of production, but especially in carrots. Carrots and tubers, garlic, they all mine really well from the soil. And so you want to have great soil distribution with your fertility. Placement is key. You want that right rate, the right time, the right formulation. As you can see here, older technology does not allow the roots those points of interceptions that it needs. Interception points are super ideal for roots. The root is growing down, and as the adventitious roots come off that main tap root, it needs to be able to feed the continuous time. Poor placement doesn't allow for that. I wanted to bring this soil sample up just as a reason to show you why you don't want to just ascertain off your soil reports from exchangeable. You want to look at solution. Even though this is not your typical ideal carrot soil, we like to be down here in the sandy loams and silt loams. Even though we will grow carrots in California all the way up into the CECs of in the 40s. But this is a perfect example. Here on our exchange, we have 430 pounds of potassium available. And if you were an agronomist telling a grower that you have plenty of potassium in your field, that would be an understatement, because if you look at the solution, we don't have very much potassium available. And this happens in California. We have 2-to-1 vertical clays that are tetrahedral silicates. And between the tetrahedral silicates, you have the potassium, and it's a very high fixing K soil. So if you were to go off this as what you would have in a soil, very little bit of that K is available. So as an agronomist to growers, it's very, very important to look at the exchangeable, but also at the solution. That way you can steer your grower correctly and also give him an ethical and correct approach to the agronomics of his current soil. So in this case, we want to add quite a bit of potassium, knowing that the potassium on exchange sites is not accessible. So when you ascertain what you're going to do through your soil reports, there's many different ways of putting your amendments out. You want to make sure you have your sulfur. You want to make sure you're composting using organic acids. Some people like to use humics. There's all sorts of things going on now in the industry. So you want to make sure you're feeding your biology of the soil correctly and early on. For us in California, we have very high soil temperatures most of the year, so these processes happen very readily. Some of you may not have as warm soil samples as we do in California, so you want to make sure you get your amendments in prior to get the biology going, so when the seed in the crop's actually growing, the nutrition's there for uptake at those demand curves. This is just another simple way that we apply acid. Instead of using sulfur in the prior picture, we can put it through booms as a liquid and apply it across the field. So as you saw in the earlier soil reports, that was a coastal report. This would be very typical for coming out of a valley. This would have been a potato grower, and as you can see, it's much different from what we had on the coast. So now we're in the valley of the state of California, and we're coming out of a pH of a 5.66. And this is the importance for the agronomist to ascertain what is going on for the grower, because if you were to grow the field prior with the other soil sample, you would be doing things wrong because you'd be acidifying a soil that's already incredibly acidic. So in this case, we would be amending the other way with a dolomite or some kind of other alkaline material to raise this pH up, because this is extremely too acidic for getting maximizing yields for carrots. And with this kind of acidity, most of these micronutrients are readily available, extremely available at that pH. And this is the point. As you can see prior, very little micronutrients are needed because the soil was so acidic in this case. So it's only calling for 12 pounds of a copper sulfate, a little bit of boron. However, if you notice, if we go back, the potassium exchange site is at 96, and we have good solution potassium. And if you look over here, we only have a 10 cc. So this is one of those ideal sandy soils. So there's not a lot of that vertitypic high shrink swell clay. So you know you'll be good with this amount of exchangeable potassium with your solution. California, as you all know, we're having a major drought right now. So with fertility, none of us anywhere in the world can control the unforeseen disasters, freezes, floods, heat waves, droughts. But what you can control is your fertility. So going through soil reports like I just illustrated is very, very key. Making sure you have the best seed in the industry. I know Villa Moran's here. You want to have your gentleman working with the best breeders that you can. Cultural practices. One pour water can ruin a carrot field, and I've seen it time and time again. You bring too much water on, you can bring disease. You can make the carrots not grow long because the carrots need to find water. So there's many different parameters with cultural practices. And then D's and possess. I'm a big stickler with this. Fertility must start with your breeders. This is carrot seed being grown up in the Pacific Northwest. And if you do not have quality seed on these umbels, how do you expect to have a high-yielding crop at the end of your production? So fertility needs to start here in these rows with these breeders. It's very, very important you have good two-way communication. Let the breeders know what you expect and what you're going for, because if energy is not going to be in the seed, it's not going to be in there to produce a beautiful carrot at the end of the day. Good reason for having good soil solution, calcium, not just on exchange sites like I showed you. It's really important. Colleague Mike Davis will talk about this more in the talk tomorrow. Cavity spot is very prolific. Calcium can really help to strengthen the carrot cell walls and to help with the incidence of attack. Many fields have it. This is the form of chemicals, but that's a whole different talk. But pythium is very, very prevalent in the West. So soil solution calcium is very, very, very important in carrot production. As nematodes, this was done by the UC Research Center down in Irvine, California. They do a lot of work in carrots. And as you can see, there's nothing fertility-wise you can do with the nematodes. You would have to fume your fields before you go into them for planting, but you can see how destructive this is. So for us in California, we are doing processed 2-inch piece carrots. This makes a carrot absolutely unsellable, so that field would not be able to go anywhere. We have 2 complexing issues in our state. We're always going from cold soils, trying to warm up from below 50, to warmer climates, to very hot 105, 110 degree days, and trying to get stands in both those time of year are very complex. In doing so, if you apply too much water to the field, you can actually bring the insects of Pythium in and wipe out a seed crop. And if you put too little water down at germination, you can cause the stem to actually seed and have issues there too, both causing major attrition to the carrot seed crop and really reducing your yields. It's as big. I don't know if France gets temperatures like this, but this is very, very common for us in the fall, trying to get stands up. So we have very, very warm temperatures combined with warm soil temperatures. Knowing this is really, really important to have an early, complete nutrition package with your fertility. Fertility can help offset attacks from disease. Many years of research, we've come to ascertain that these are some pretty key micronutrient levels for carrot seed production in the beginning. This ratio is pretty much spot on. So 40% zinc, 10% magnesium, and 1% iron. I've seen substantial yield increase in carrots by just having this ratio applied to the seed before planting. With the processing carrots, we have very high planting densities per linear foot, incredibly large planting densities. And the more that you can bring that crop up uniform for your ranch manager, the less attrition, you're going to have a much better stand at the end of the day. And this is really big for us. The whole part of growing carrots in California is getting the stand up uniform and getting it growing quickly. With all that I mentioned earlier, all said and done, if you're not going to do something precisely, then it really doesn't matter. So out in the West, you want to make sure that when you're planting your carrots, that your fertility has been banded or broadcasted in properly into where you're going to be growing so the roots can access all that nutrition properly and not have to go search for it, as well as your placement of your seed. As you can see, as I mentioned earlier, that beneficial nutritional package early on will give you a much better stand count. And as agronomists, this is what I look for, is if you can walk out into a field and tell right away how well that grower is doing, because a good grower will have a phenomenal stand. All the plants will be at the same height above the soil surface, and they will all be growing at the same time frame. You won't have plants that are this tall and plants that are this tall, and that makes a nightmare for a ranch manager trying to water. So proficiency comes in with getting that stand up early and uniform. I can't express that enough to growers. By adding early seed nutrition, as you can see here on the right, you can increase your yields between 8 and 12%. I've even seen more, but if you make the numbers too big, nobody ever believes you in life. So this is a nice conservative number. And by adding early seed nutrition, you can see the difference in the carrots. This would be the control. This would have had the early seed nutrition. So just simply by adding 3 micronutrients to your crop at time of planting can really increase your yield, and not only increase the yield, but your quality. You want to grow a better crop next to your competitor, your neighbor, etc. You want your product to go to market and last longer. Very important through the whole growing season to monitor your crop. Very, very key. For us in the West, it's very important to continually watch your tops as the temperatures continue to climb in the summer. They will start to decrease in the fall. With that decrease of temperatures, the soil temperatures also decrease. And as we know, below 50 degrees, the microbiological processes in your soil really start to diminish. That being the case, we need to keep these tops green. If you start seeing chlorosis, it's time to come in with tissue samples so you can ascertain if your crop needs any kind of micros or if it needs any kind of N before that soil completely goes cold. Because as we all know in the process industry, carrots are harvested by their tops, by belts. If you don't have a top, you can't get the carrot out of the ground economically. The cost becomes very expensive. In my years of working as an agronomist, I have noticed that for the larger commercial growers, if you do have this complete fertility package up front, the varieties that are more susceptible to air checking at harvest time, you'll see less incidence of that. There's more calcium and potassium in the carrots because you adequately put that necessary amount in prior to the crop being planted. And that makes a big difference because the less air checking, the less disease, you have a better pack out, you have a better quality at the end of the day. I apologize for my this slide. This was supposed to be tissues. It's a soil, but we can do the same thing. So this would be a mid-season, let's say, for tissue. We want to ascertain, like I just spoke, to make sure we have good micronutrient levels, we have good N levels. As the crop's coming to its fruition and the maturation process is almost complete, so going into harvest, you know you're going to have a nice green healthy top and it's not going to go from chlorotic to necrotic on you and have some issues. I saw some pictures up here in France. It looks like they do a lot of the harvesting the same way we do around Europe. It's all belt driven, so you need to have a very nice healthy green top. That has a lot to do with fertility. We have diseases that come in the fall, alternary in the organic industry, and we don't have much chemical control because it's organic, so there's not sprays. And so if you lose this top in organic farming, you have to bring in crews to hand dig, and it's extremely costly. So the key for a good grower, a good agronomist, in those dog days is to make sure that top stays green. You know you have the length of your carrot, you know you have the quality of your carrot under the soil, it's ready to go, but you got to keep the top healthy. And that comes in with a good foliar program, mid-season if the tissue temples show you need it, and a good pre-plant program. This is what we're trying to avoid, the alternaria. I've seen fields melt down overnight. You start like this, and within 24 hours, it looks like somebody poured diesel on your crop. It's completely gone. Without tops, you cannot harvest, as you know. So to finish up the talk, this is what it looks like when you have to hand harvest carrots without tops. Even though the tops are here, this is what it would be. They would be bunching them up. This is for fresh market pictures, but if your tops do melt down from alternaria, it's all about hand digging them up. This would have been imperators for fresh market, and those were hand dug as well. As you can see, quality is really, really important. Everything in California is all fresh market, so a lot of it's export and sold throughout the United States. And so we have to have the best carrots in the world. So quality is a must. Fertility plays a big role in that. So to summarize, nutrition is paramount. I've been doing this for 20 years now, up and down the coast of California, in the valleys of California, many different crops. And one thing I see is we lack people that really understand soil nutrition. We need to get back to the basics and really teach our growers and work with our agronomists and come in and help the grower with a good fertility program before you plant. It's paramount. Some of the things I discussed for high-yielding crops: make sure you do soil reports, make sure you know what kind of crop that was grown before you so you can adjust wisely and correctly. Look at the soil reports, ascertain what the crop's going to need, and then go from there for your grower. Get your seedlings germinated up quickly. Make sure you have a good nutritional package on them, if it's a 2x2, if it's a liquid, etc. Understand those soil changes that we talked about. If you're going from acidity to alkalinity, if you're going from alkalinity to neutral, if you have sodicity, if you have salinity. Make sure you understand all this. Understanding this will allow you to optimize your carrots. And this is the biggest thing for me, because in California, I come across people that are, my grandfather's been farming it this way for 30 years and we're not going to change. And those kind of people get left behind. You really need to have people that are forward thinkers in your operation and want to drive innovation and drive technology. And those are the people that are going to continue to feed the demand that we have in the world today. So always look for innovation and have people continually coming through your operations, because there's so much we can learn and teach each other. We can't know it all, and there's so many crops out there. So be humble and be open-hearted, and always be willing to sit around that table with your colleague and share ideas. That's how we'll grow our industry. It's a very beautiful industry, and we need to continue to grow it with innovation. Thank you.
Now, Andrew Molyneux from United Kingdom. Can you clarify what you mean by air checking?
Air checking?
Yeah.
There's certain varieties of carrots that like to crack when the belt brings them up to the top of the machinery and then dumps them off the arm into the trailer. And so there's more varieties that are more susceptible. Over the years, I've seen breeders are doing much better in this, but I've even noticed with really good solid fertility up front and a good foliar program mid-season can help quite a bit with the air checking. So the carrot will actually split down the middle as it hits the side after being harvested.